This stag is a direct result of having worked off sign, knew he was here from his rubs, his active wallow and his tracks.
The big question is, as a sambar hunter, do we have to understand sign and be able to identify it to shoot sambar? Well, no, we don't. We can just walk around, get lucky and shoot sambar. Or we can understand a little bit about sign and work off it and help put those clues together. Okay, before we go too far, let's understand a couple of things. There's no script. The only script is what the sambar leave us to look at. I stutter, I repeat myself. So you're just going to have to get used to a few mistakes in amongst what I hope will be the good stuff. Oh, come on! Now, working off sign, it's not rocket science, is it really? The deer have come from that side of the track, they've crossed over the track, they've gone to that side where the wallow is about 200 metres away. Question, where would I look for the deer? That side, where they've come from, or that side where they've gone? At the moment, there's a beautiful breeze coming up from the wallow to where I stand. These deer marks here are reasonably fresh. Not a very big deer. This sambar. Here's the front foot, here's the back foot. The back foot's only about that long, so it's quite a immature animal. Be well under 12 months. There we put the cigarette lighter next to it to give you a comparison. The rear hoof always imprints on top of the front hoof until we start to talk about really big stags. And quite often big stags, that rear hoof does not imprint on the front one. Good sized stag track here. He's got his front foot here and the rear foot. Rear foot, because of the bulk of the animal, can't imprint right on top of the front foot. So we know it's a good size animal. We don't know how good his antlers are until we get a look at him, or we get him on a trail camera. Here we have the running marks from the deer. We'll just try and get it a bit clearer. Oh, I made a mess of it, haven't I? Oh. Here's one toe, here's the other toe. Classic running mark. When the deer's run, its toes will spread from the weight. So the pointy end here is the direction it's going, and as it's run, the weight of the animal has spread those hooves. If it was walking, these would be together. Got the imprints here of a mature sambar doe where she's run across a road. Clearly see the marks. The feet have spread, or the toes have spread from her weight when she's run. When you're tracking the deer, you'll see the scuff marks there in the bottom right hand side of the frame. When you're tracking the deer, the idea is not to walk along looking at the tracks all the time.
Look as far ahead as possible. Search, search, search for the deer. And then you walk to the furthest track you can see while you're still looking for the deer. Now out where the dog is in the background is the furthest I can see a scuff mark in the leaves. So the idea is to get out there without looking at the ground again. Just slowly walk out there. Look, look, look all the time. A reasonably good example of tracks on the hill where we can actually see a lot further than just looking at our feet. They lead right down into the shadows and down that clearing, and we can see them most of the way from here down to a scrape that we have. Just a good example of being able to track a lot further than looking just at your feet. We're quite lucky to have these actually. 2 sets of marks of varying age. You'll see a difference between the ones on the right and the ones on the left. The ones on the right would be less than 5 minutes old. I watched the deer walk along the road. The ones on the left have had rain on them. We had 8 mil of rain last night. One of the hardest things about sign interpretation and aging sign is understanding how the various weather conditions, sunlight, rain, frost, fog, all those things affect how fresh a track looks. So we have to take that into account. The boot print, the deer marks. Now what's interesting here is several things. There's a difference between the deer mark and the boot print. But the most interesting thing is how this boot print is going to change in the weather conditions over the next couple of days. That's our true learning experience in this mud. We know the stag's been here. We know he's hanging around here from his rubs and from the fact I've seen him. But what is really valuable is the learning experience that this boot print offers, because we know exactly how fresh that is. These marks, we're guessing. Now, anyone who's going to tell you it's 7 hours and 10 minutes old has watched too much TV. A very fresh deer track on the hard road surface. My boot print, 2.5 hours ago. I can see a difference between the two. Not a really big deer. Grass is standing up. Not a big deal because I press on that, it stands up straight away. Same here. Stayed down at the moment. Won't take very long for that to stand up. It's had no rain on it. The significant thing about this is we're about 180 metres from where I've been camped for probably a week and a half now. And this deer is still happy to wander around close to where I'm camped. So the lesson there is you should be looking for deer from the moment you get up out of your swag until the moment you get back in it of a night. This is a good fresh deer mark. This is last night's mark. It's on top of my tyre marks. It's quite late in the morning. I've had a poke around. I'm on my way back. Couldn't do anything with these this morning for the simple reason this deer went in the direction that the wind was blowing, so it was just pointless to try and follow it up. These trotting marks of 2 Sambar, you can see they're well spaced. There's not a tendency anymore for them to step one foot on top of the other foot, and they're spaced out. Now what happens, they're usually about the same pace as what a human being would be between the imprints, which is a handy thing when you're trying to track deer in really hard conditions. When you've got that last imprint that you're looking at, The next one should be about 1 pace apart, which is about the same distance. Just the faintest, the very faintest of a deer's hoof print on the hard ground. So we go from the very obvious tracks to those that are almost indiscernible. Very fresh mark. See how it's kicked the dust up? Not a very big deer. I've had a good look around. It's almost impossible to see the tracks back in the vegetation. Over a 4-day period, these tracks have dried out considerably. No longer any moisture in them. They actually do look a bit older than 4 days, but we know they're not. The grass has stood up totally. They haven't fared too bad. They look a lot fresher than 4 days compared to the other marks. These marks see a fair bit of shade here and a little bit more protected, and the ground holds its moisture a lot more. The clarity there is no clarity of the marks, and the same through the whole puddle. Not paddle, puddle. We'll get it right. You've got to put up with these things. If you want to watch this, you've got to put up with these stutters and stammers. But all these marks, the moisture's gone from the mud, there's no clarity, and they look old. The same in the puddle. When we look across at the puddle there, all the marks around and in the puddle look several days old. Weather conditions play a remarkable role in how fresh the tracks appear. Now, just to show I'm not tricking you, these are deer pellets. I didn't taste them, I only smelt them, all right. Now, they've still got a good, strong, fresh odour, right? So, we had a sunny day yesterday. It would have copped the sun here, as you can see, I've got the sunlight on me. It would have copped the sun here. So, I'd say they're fairly fresh. Now, the trick to this is, you can't eat deer sign, especially these, right? Good, fresh, strong-smelling pellets, good, fresh deer marks like we have here. Stop looking at the ground, start looking for the deer. Sign is an indicator, it's not a means in its own. Right, we can learn a lot about sign, but we get too carried away looking at it, it's going to cost us. We're not going to see the deer, we're not going to get the photograph we want, or we're not going to shoot that animal. That's where they belong, on the ground. This is too good an opportunity, these droppings on the ground, because they're red hot. Well, they're last night, so it's near enough to red hot. They've had almost no sun on them so far this morning, but it's too good an opportunity not to capitalise on.
Now I can collect these, which I'm going to do. I'm going to put them in various locations where they get full sun, where they get a bit of shade, where they'll get a bit of rain, where they'll be sheltered from the rain, etc. And from that, and looking at them day after day, I can further develop my sign reading skills. Oh, that's interesting. I'll show you something else. We'll leave them there. We'll put something there so I can find them again. I'm not very good at finding things some days. Bit of bark.
Now, deer, when they do their droppings, they don't do little neat piles like this, do they? Right? But what I've got here is one lot of pellets and a second lot of pellets, both out of different deer. Now, you'll notice there's a difference in the shape that really doesn't tell us a lot. But this one here, how it has this little nipple on the end. Now, some people are of the opinion that stag's poop will have this and the hinds will look flatter like this on the end. There's a lot of myths about this sort of thing. Day one, full sunlight most of the day, from early morning through till in the afternoon. We'll just watch how they age. Dappled sunlight out in the open, sheltered under a tree in dappled sunlight. Reasonable protection from the rain, not a lot. Where I've left these pellets, we're on a bit of a dry slope, bit of stringy bark here. Common sort of place to find deer dropping, so we'll see how they age. These droppings have been here for an hour now. They're in dappled sunlight. They've hardly had any sun on them. It's just the slightest amount. They still look really fresh. They haven't started to crack. They haven't started to deteriorate. It's going to be interesting to see what happens between them and the ones in the sunlight. When you see the difference, an hour in the sunlight's made, it's quite spectacular. Might not be to a lot of people, but if you're a deer hunter and poop doesn't excite you when you find fresh poop, there's something wrong. These have started to dry out. Have a look at the little cracks. All that shininess is gone. Oh, there's a little bit of shininess here. Pretty good. This is a simple experiment. You can do at home, improve your skills, just improve them so quickly that it just blitzes all those learning experiences in the bush. You can do so much at home by doing simple things like this, putting down some droppings, watching how they age. Note the hygiene this time. Now what we're going to do here, we're going to turn this one over and you'll notice something. I hope you notice it. Have a look how shiny and new it is underneath. It's still got its shine. So when we look at pellets on the ground that don't look like they're worth much and seen a bit of sun, just knock them over like that and you'll see that that's a fresh pellet. 2 hours now and we're really starting to see a change here. We'll turn another one over and see whether it's still moist underneath. Still moist, but not as moist as it was an hour ago. This one I just turned over, that's why he's a little bit shiny. Just got the slightest amount of scent when you break it open. This is our second pellet group. Up until around 15 minutes ago has been in dappled sunlight. So it's changed considerably just in that 15 minutes. We'll still have scent to it. This pellet group's been here for 2 hours. It's under a tree. It's had hardly any sun at all. It's just starting to get a little bit now coming through the leaves. Out of the 4 pellet groups I've put in various locations, these ones are holding up the best and are taking the longest to age. Not surprising because these are very well sheltered where they are. Still got their shine, still had a few flies when I come down, and will certainly still have their scent. We'll roll them over and have a look. Come on. Still got some shine underneath. So even though the sun's hammered them, they've still got that shiny bit underneath. They still have a very, very slight amount of scent. Different location, they've been in dappled sunlight, the ground's more moist where they're laying, and you can see the difference. These ones are sheltered under a tree on moist ground, and again we see another difference between the previous two. Our fourth group of pellets, well protected in a bit of bush, still got a little bit of shine. We're starting to lose our shine here. So 24 hours puts a fair test on a set of pellets. Following light rain, you can see a considerable pickup in the appearance of the droppings. After 4 days in partial sunlight and following light rain, we can see an improvement in the appearance of the droppings. They're well sheltered under a tree. This is just following some light rain, which gives them an appearance of being quite fresh. We've had varying weather conditions, from rain, a considerable amount of rain I may add, sunshine, mist, wind and fog. This position has some shelter from the sunlight and is less harsh than the other position. You should be able to notice a remarkable difference between these droppings and the droppings that are in the full sunlight with absolutely no protection on a harsh piece of ground, cop the wind, cop the rain, cop the frost, everything. Whereas these are more protected and thus they look a lot fresher, even though they're the same age as the other droppings. Not as well sheltered as position number 3. So there is a little bit of difference here than what we're seeing at position number 3. But if we look carefully, we'll start to see some of the difference. Like this dropping here has dried out a bit more than some of the droppings we were looking. But then again, we look at this dropping and it's still got a shine. So when we start to look at droppings to try and age them, we should be looking at differences between the individual pellets within that pellet group, which will tell us a fair bit. These, being day 10, will not have any scent to them at all as far as a human can detect. We roll them over, same underneath as they are on top, basically, a little bit of shine there. But the shine on these is just brought about last night. We had a heavy fog come in, and so they've been moistened up by the heavy fog. But at 10 days, they don't look too bad. When we start to look at droppings and try to age them, hopefully you've noticed so far in the examples I've given you that there is a big difference relative to where they're located. For example, whether they're unprotected, whether they've got some protection, but particularly the effect of the weather and the temperature, which I haven't mentioned so far yet, but the temperature will have a big difference on the way these pellets dry out and the rate they dry out. The only way we're really going to understand them is through experience. And the best way to get the experience is doing something like I'm doing here. It will advance your learning so quick that it'll leave everything else behind. Over the last 4 days, we've had a fair amount of rain and drizzle. The effect of that, as you can see, the appearance of the droppings has picked up remarkably from the first and second day. The cracks have closed up on this. They no longer have that dry, real old appearance. From this, it's quite evident the effect that the environment and the weather has on the droppings and their appearance. It's getting pretty interesting, I reckon. The grass appears to have grown up amongst the droppings, which gives us a little bit of a hint they've been here a fair while. Just like position 1, they don't look too bad, although these ones for some reason seem to have a little bit of mud on them. I don't know why. Under the tree, where it's well sheltered, These droppings look pretty good at a glance. Don't appear to have deteriorated as much as the others, and their colour's darker. Wouldn't have been getting any sun under here at all. They're looking pretty good. This one's got a fair bit of shine to it. You wouldn't think they'd been here. Well, I wouldn't have thought they'd been here 19 days. You might have. But I wouldn't have thought they were here 19 days. I would have thought they were a bit fresher than that. We all see different things when we look at this. What I see and what I interpret will be a different way than you look at it, which doesn't matter. It's what you want to understand and what you want to see when you look at these things. We've seen sunshine with warm to mild days around 18 degrees. We've seen heavy rain, we've seen light rain, we've seen drizzle, we've seen fog. We haven't had a hard frost yet, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens to these pellets after a hard frost. I think the most significant thing about this is not how the pellets have aged, but how the grass has grown up over it. So at around 4 weeks, it's the vegetation that's changed more than the pellets. Very well sheltered. They don't look to have deteriorated as much as the ones out in the open, which is to be expected. Be interesting to compare the other photographs with this one, but this one also appears that the grass is growing up and starting to cover the pellets. Not a lot of deterioration, not as much as I would have expected. Even though they're sheltered, they're still getting the rain and the cold. We've had a fair bit of rain, but we see this one here might be a little bit of mould starting to grow. Starting to see some quite significant change. Seen all sorts of weather, rain, sunshine, obviously sunshine, you can see it now, as well as heavy frosts. Hasn't had snow though. It would be very easy to walk past these pellets, as you can see, the way the grass is growing up around them. The wind noise is free. I hope it doesn't show up, it probably will. They have deteriorated, but as you can see, not to the extent of the ones that are out in the open. Very obvious to the eye still. You just see these at a glance when you walk around, unlike the ones in the grass where it's grown around them. Fully exposed. Seen all weather conditions. The last week's been quite sunny, about the last 5 days. Difficult to observe at a glance because they're fairly covered by grass. But they are there. Well sheltered under the tree. Not a lot of deterioration, but again the grass is growing right up over them. The last week they've seen about 100 mil of snow, rain, frost and drizzle. This is the first clear day we've had in over a week, in over 7 days. It has had an effect on the droppings. I think it's made them look a little bit better, actually. These droppings in the grass, if I didn't know exactly where they were, I would walk past these. I'd tell you, having a bad day, right? As you can see, the lighting's playing havoc. The droppings are hard to find. They're hard to find because I had a mark with sticks where they were on the ground. The cattle have scattered the sticks. The grass has grown. And they're proving a little bit difficult to find. But I will find them. Lyrebirds making noises. The magpie stopped because I'm talking loud. We'll find them. There they are. We'll have to rearrange the sticks. Now at around 14 weeks, they're getting quite difficult to see in the ground. I'll zoom in a bit. How's that for a technique? $50 years of looking at sign and hunting sambar.
It's always something to learn. This experiment with the droppings, it's taught me a few more things, and there's always that little bit more to learn and hopefully apply. These droppings, they've been scattered, they've had rain, they've had snow, and I've watched them along with the other 3 lots of droppings change over that 3-month period. I'll continue this experiment. I'll probably run it through for at least 12 months or until there's no droppings left, because I'm learning.
No need for a closer look. These are really fresh, these couple of droppings. There's a line of droppings. I just glanced down as I was walking past. I've already picked one up. Still has its scent, so we know it's under 24 hours old. Don't eat. Did you eat that? Deer beds, often fairly difficult to recognise, but if you look very hard here, you might be lucky to be able to see just the difference in the appearance of the leaf litter and the grass, how the grass is crushed down and how the leaf litter is crushed down.
I'm in a deer bed here, a sambar bed. If you look closely, you'll notice a difference in the appearance of the leaf litter and the grass. The leaf litter here is standing up. Here it's been crushed down. Where the deer's laid down, it's crushed the leaf litter and the grass compared to this grass behind me, how it's standing up. These type of beds can be fairly difficult to recognise. But once you get an eye for them, it's not a lot to it. And it's like all sign. Practice, 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 and it becomes second nature at a glance to recognise things like this deer bed. Now, just as an example, look at the grass standing up. Where the deer laid, I don't weigh 200 kilos, so I've got to do this. It'll all be down like that.
The sambar bed is in the centre of the frame. That makes it easy to see, doesn't it? Now, if you look at the appearance of the leaf litter on the ground in the centre, now look to the left, you will see an obvious difference. It's the sort of difference all the books and magazines you read can't teach you. The only thing that can teach you about this is to actually look at it yourself and take time to see what you're looking at. In the end, these beds become nothing more than a matter of a glance to recognise them. And it really is that simple, but it takes a lot of practice and a lot of dedication to be able to recognise these things. It's pretty simple. You're going to have to be a pretty good hunter, probably one of the best hunters in Australia, to be able to consistently see sambar in beds like this. It's just really not an option. But the option is knowing where these beds are and where the deer are most likely to travel to feed. To feed, they've got to get up out of their bed, they've got to walk. When they're walking, they're obvious and they're vulnerable. When they're laying in a bed like this, they're almost impossible to see, unless, of course, you know where the beds are and you know where to look. Droppings helped me find where the sambar bed was. The reason is, when sambar lay in their bed, they don't crap in their bed like some other animals do, particularly wallabies and kangaroo. When they've been laying down for a while, and they first get up and they walk off, they usually defecate. That's a fancy word for having a crap, but they usually do that. Now what will happen is there can often be a really good line of strong droppings in and out of beds. And that's how I found this network of beds where we are. And there's probably about 10 beds hidden in here. I stuttered then, but it doesn't matter. Does it? If it does, you're watching the wrong video. I tell you what, I'm gonna need a good editor to sort this out. We're in another deer bed here. The significance of this deer bed is we're only around 100 metres from a wallow. This is one of the reasons I mentioned to people that it's a good idea not to walk straight to the wallow, to have a good look around first. Especially for stalkers, have a good look, search all the immediate area and as far as you can see around the wallow, because the deer often camp very close to their wallow. Now this one's fairly significant because it's a big patch of bare earth. Now other animals, as well as deer, make beds. Kangaroos, wallabies, wombats, cattle, but this isn't cattle in here. Now we've got wombat scratchings here. They tend to scratch their bed out. Wombats, kangaroos or wallabies tend to scratch their beds out. Sambar don't dig their bed out. They just tend to lay down. Now what's actually happened here, there's been a wombat working in here and created this bare earth and dug it out a little bit, which has obviously made a more comfortable bed for Sammy Sambar. Right? There's a lot of deer hair. There's a lot of deer hair present here. Now, when you have a lot of deer hair, it's obvious the deer spend a lot of time laying in that bed. Some beds just have a little bit of hair in them, and some, like this little network of beds in here, will have a very substantial amount of hair in it. More important, I hope that I find a substantial deer in it one day. But very, very difficult to approach. These sort of beds are very, very difficult to approach. There's so much scrub around it. But when you know exactly where it is and you put a network of beds like this into the GPS system, you've got an advantage. And sometimes these beds, you can actually see them from the opposite side of the gully. This one you can't. This little network in here you can't see from the opposite side. But when you can, they're always worth a look with the binoculars. We've got a couple of deer tracks here where the deers walk through the bedding area. In here, we've got 4 beds that I've found. Now, this bush here is dogwood, and it's not a favoured food plant. They would very, very rarely eat it. But it offers good shelter. And you notice where we are? We're in the sunshine. Yes, we're in the sunshine. Now, this is another Sambar bed. I've already inspected it, and it's got hair in it. And there's about 3 beds where I'm standing. The key to this is not to try and shoot them in the beds, to understand where they travel back and forwards to. A deer in this sort of bush is almost impossible to walk up on. Take a better man than me, Gunga Din. There's deer sign, and then there's stag sign. Obviously, rub trees are good indications that you're in stag country.
This rub here, it's fairly significant. It's May, so this stag's definitely in hard antler, although some stags won't be in hard antler yet. There'll still be a few in velvet. It's a recent rub. I'd say it's probably yesterday's rub from the weather we've had. That's a guess, right? It could be a little bit older than just yesterday's. It's definitely not last night's. What we've got here is the scar has browned off, and we've got this very old scar here which is significant. Sambar often have a beat and they'll rub the same trees year after year, which is a handy thing to remember. It's dried out a bit. Still got the slightest of scent, but the trick is to get something like a knife and we can visually see a remarkable difference. When that looks like that, get your nose out of the dirt. We'll come up and we'll have a closer look. Here we can see the very old rub mark and scar that's dried out. It's been there for years, that the bark started to heal over it. Here we have the more recent one, and you'll notice if we just make a little mark, you'll see the difference between that and that. Where I scraped it with the knife, it's already started to change colour slightly, and up here you can see where the bark's actually started to dry out and crack. A very obvious difference from where I've scraped that with the knife to what was already here. So we can see by doing our comparisons, we can learn so much so quickly just at a glance. Well, he's not red hot, but we know there's one here. We know there's a hard antlered stag here somewhere. The question is, where? The ground tells me he's gone that way from the tracks, so that's not too hard. But here's the problem. Wind's coming from there, and it's quite a consistent breeze today. Only option I've got, if I want to go over there and look, I have to climb back out and around and come back down on the other side. Either that, or we look for a second one. A lot of decisions to make, isn't there? Generally believed that stags rub trees to advertise their presence to other deer. Now this rub's fairly old. It's got quite a few cracks in it. It's about 3 weeks to a month old. I know that because I saw it when it just been made. These two antlers are very different. This one off of the young stag and this one off a mature stag. Very smooth, this antler. It's smooth because he's done a lot of rubbing, not because he's carried that antler for more than 1 year, which is what some people think. This cherry tree has been continually rubbed year after year after year, but not by the same stag. Different stags visit this cherry. It's an important signpost for deer in this area, and this gives me a clue or indicates that stags use this area continually. That means year after year, not month after month, but continually use it year after year. Not a fresh rub, as you can see. She's an old rub. Tell by the colour of the bark, by the cracks in it, and just the way it's browned right off. There's no deer tracks here that are very discernible. They've all washed out, and this indicates that it was rubbed a long time ago. But one of the interesting things about rub trees, quite often, is when they're on game trails like the one I'm on, the side the tree's rubbed indicates the direction the animals come from. For instance, when a stag comes along to rub his antlers, he doesn't come along and go around the other side of the tree to rub it. As he approaches the tree, he will rub the tree that he chooses to rub or thrash. So that's just a little indicator that sometimes when we're on a game trail, and if we get a line of rub trees along the game trail, which is very common, the side they're rubbed on is an indication of the direction the deer's walking in. We've come around to the other side of the rub tree just to demonstrate how the rubbing on this tree is predominantly one side. More to rub trees than meets the eye, isn't there? Hear that? On a day like today, any day, a stag cannot quietly rub the tree. It takes a lot of force and effort to scar that tree and to remove the bark. And he's fair dinkum when he's rubbing it. He's just not having a little pussyfoot around. He's hooking into it. Hint, you're going to hear that on a day like today when there is the gentlest of breezes. You will also, at times, see the tops of trees, saplings, actually moving on a still day like today. Now, I got caught out once. I only got caught out once. Stupid me. What's going on down there? What's that noise? So I walked down to have a look. Well, I didn't walk down, I strolled down, didn't I? It never happened a second time. I never strolled a second time. Bit of a giveaway. It's more than our eyes when we hunt. There's our nose and there's our ears. He spent a fair bit of time working at this. It wouldn't have been a quiet operation either. There'd have been a fair bit of noise going on. Sapling here that's been rubbed and thrashed a bit. Now, we can't necessarily relate a small rub like this to meaning small stags. Big stags will do this as well. Just tricking. I don't get that close to them. This stag's really fired up here. He's put a lot of effort and a lot of force into working on this tree. He's hooking right into him. Big deep scars here. Be from his tines, top parts of his antlers where they've dug into the tree. Very deep gouges in the trunk. This is probably caused by the coronet on the antler rubbing like this. This is a cherry tree. It has a strong odour when the stags have rubbed it. These are a favourite tree of Sambar. They like to bed under the big mature ones. They afford quite a lot of cover and protection from the elements. But you can see how this really stands out from a distance. Yes, it's an old rub, and to most hunters it would mean nothing. I like to think, whether I'm right or wrong, I'd like to think I'm right though, that what happens is when you find areas with a lot of old rubs like this, it means the stags will come into this area and will start rubbing again. Now, some trees age very quickly and some hold their rub sign for a long time. I can see a fresh rub from where I'm standing, and there will be more. Recent rub tree, not really fresh, but it is recent. There's another one a little bit further down the hill. There's a lot of old rubs through here. We'll have another look at another old rub. But the stags come and go. And particularly this time of year, we're right at the end of September, there should have been a lot of good heavy rubbing through this country. This Sambar rub has been done this year on this side of the tree. It's also got an old rub on the other side of the tree. That's not unusual. I often find trees that are rubbed in successive years. Whether it's the same stag or whether it's another stag, I can't be certain. But it's quite common to find trees that are rubbed in consecutive years. The tree in the centre of the frame has been recently rubbed, but also has old scarring on it. The tree to the right of it has very old scarring,
And the white gum in the background has extremely old scarring where the bark has wrapped back around the scar mark on the tree and it's healing itself. Several animals mark trees. Cattle, wombats, kangaroos, and of course deer. Well, this one is a deer rub. And there are a few significant differences between one and the other. But every time we see a marked tree, doesn't necessarily mean it's been marked by Sambar. Well, we might think that looks promising, but I don't think it's as promising as it appears. Looks can be deceiving in the bush. It's not a Sambar rub. It's actually wombats doing this. A bit of a ring-in, and they often catch our eye like it did from up on the ridge up here. I thought, well, we've still got to go and investigate just to see whether it is. Now, there's a few things here that are a giveaway. One, there's no deer tracks. That's the first giveaway. Two, there's these long shavings of bark scattered around on the ground. Now, what's actually happened is the wombats come along, grabbed the bark and stripped it off. There's a reason for that, and the reason is they take it back to their burrow, this stringy bark, and they make a nest out of it. Now, I'm not crapping because it's true, right? A lot of people don't think that's true, but I've seen evidence on trail cams of the wombats stripping it off, dragging it along the ground, and taking it in their burrow. But deer hunters have known this for a long time because of the sign that's around the tree. The earth will be fairly bare around some of the trees, but it's always like this. If we look really hard, we'll actually see teeth marks in the bark. You don't always see them, but sometimes they're quite obvious and sometimes they're not obvious. But what we've got to do here is when we're looking at sign, we've got to think about what we're looking at and how it's been made and what's made it. Because what'll happen here is when a Sambar rubs it, he'll rub it like that with his antlers, and it'll actually make shavings around the base of the tree. It won't make big bits of bark like this, because he's not stripping it off, he's actually rubbing it off, so it'll make shavings. Around the bottom we've got all this stripped off bark. It's stripped off, they're in long lengths because it's been actually stripped off like this. When those stags rub, they rub their antlers on the bark like that, which creates shavings and small particles of bark. Maybe the biggest you'll see will be like that. The other giveaway that it wasn't a Sambar stag is this here. As I said, this is a giveaway that it wasn't a Sambar stag that's done this. We're going to pretend the stick's an antler, right? And he comes and rubs. There's no way he's not going to break all that off. It's that simple. So we know that's not a rub tree from a stag, and we know it's wombat. On the bottom here you'll find the earth fairly bare around here from the activity of the wombat as well. So you get that. You often get the wombat crap as well, the wombat droppings here, but definitely not a stag. So don't get too excited when you find these. When it's fine shavings like this, it'll be Sambar. If it's big lumps of bark, it's wombats. The other thing that I've seen mark trees like this, I've watched kangaroos mark trees, but they tend to strip like that with their claws, not rub up and down. So they strip the bark back off, particularly stringy barks like that. Two antlers here. This antler's off a big mature stag, and this is off a much younger stag. The big mature stags tend to have heavier pearling on their antlers than younger stags. This becomes evident when they start to rub a tree. You'll see the pearling marks on the bark where they've rubbed the tree. I'm not tricking and I'm not making fake sign. This is to show you the effect that heavy pearling has when a stag rubs a tree like this. Leaves deep scars, but wide space scars. From this we can deduct that it's generally a big older stag because he's got the heavy pearling on his antlers
that young stags normally don't have. Next to the deep scratch marks are the rub marks from that smooth antler. There's a big difference in the two. Fairly old rub, it's well dried out. That one's a bit more recent, and so there's a bit of broken branch on the ground. As we've covered before, make a scratch mark, even with your fingernail. You see a marked difference between that and the rest of it. When it looks like that, it's red hot. But we don't need anything fresher, do we, than 3 deer that run across the road at 11 o'clock in the morning. Freddie should be able to see the difference between the old rub marks here and the scratch I just made with my fingernail. Quite a stark difference in appearance. This bloke's leading a short life, I'm telling you. He's leading a short life. Old hound hunter's saying, one eye on the road, one eye on the bank. Just like the wallow back there, where he's wallowed on the road. Someone's going to find this bloke, and they're going to put hounds on him. I hope he can run. He probably can, that's why he survived. There's a time to get your nose out of the dirt, and that's nearly all the time. First we look for the deer, then we look for the sign. But rub trees like the two in the camera, if we're not noticing them from a distance, we've lost our concentration. And it's all about concentration and the intensity and maintaining that intensity to look. These two rubs are on the edge of the game trail where the stags walk past, marking his beat as he's been walking along. Reasonable scrape here, with sort of a reasonable sized foot stag's been at it. With the scrape, what he'll do when he approaches his scrape, he'll actually dig at it sometimes with his 4 feet like that and dig it out. That's the reason we call it a scrape, because they scrape it out. Then he'll often urinate here, which you can smell from a considerable distance. Yesterday, I could smell a scrape from about 50 metres away, just from the stench from the urine where the stag had been peeing in his scrape. The other thing they do is they will stand on their back legs and rub their muzzle under here to leave their scent up in the tree. That's one of the reasons that scrapes are right next to a tree, so they can put their scent up in the tree. And quite often they favour trees like this with a big lean on them. Where we are here, we've got a game trail here, we've got a game trail there, and I've followed fresh stag tracks down this hill to this scrape. Now this is a good scrape. Game trail leads through here. The predominant direction of travel on this game trail is that way. I've followed stag tracks through to here, and a series of rubs that follow the game trail. It's obviously part of his beat. He won't be the only stag using it, there'll be more than one. We're often confused by that, thinking we're hunting one stag, but in reality it's quite often more than one stag that's making the stag sign. One thing about scrapes, it's not just the stags that visit them. Deer of all sexes, well, it's only 2 sexes, isn't there, and ages will visit the scrape. They will sniff at the scrape. They sometimes hang around and investigate a fair bit. Hinds as well will stand on their back legs and sniff up there where the stag's left his scent. A very important social function, this. It serves a very important social function. The advantage of this scrape is, particularly for a hound hunter, there's a track up there about 150 metres away. Easy one to pop in and check out for deer tracks. The other thing is, for a stalker as well, easy one to just pop over the ridge and have a quick look at. Might be a stag, might be a hind walking through here. Good scrape. I pointed this out weeks and weeks ago. I have to think there, because when you're getting old, your memory's not that good sometimes. But weeks and weeks ago, and showed everyone how it was an insignificant scrape that looked worthless.
Scrapes aren't always that obvious, and quite often we walk past them. This is actually a scrape. You can see the grass has started to grow in it again, but it will fire up again. It's on a bit of a game trail.
Well, in the meantime, Sammy the Sambar's been back, rubbed the tree, scraped up all the ground.
Here's the scraped ground where he's dug it up. He's given it a fair bit of digging. Here's the tree. Up on the tree, when we go up a bit, we'll just pause when we get there. So the fresh rubs on the tree from his antlers, so we know he's in hard antler all right. And we go up the tree. And here's the overhanging branches that he can put his scent up in. They're a fair way up. Right up, he would have his nose right up in them.
26th May. I had to count. I've been in the bush a while. I had to count what month we're up to. I knew it was the 26th, right? The significance of this is that the last few days, the scrapes I've been going to, the wallows I've been going to, have all been visited. The wallows haven't been actively worked, but they've been visited by stags, but a lot of the scrapes have been dug up. That's a good one for the diary for me for next year. Ground's churned up a fair bit, still got its fluffiness to it. As a hunter, this gives us some good sign to start to work off. The obvious question is, which way did he go? Did he go that way, or did he go the other way? So if we track the ground, we can find that out and take advantage of it. The thing is, he's advertising his presence to the other deer, but he's also advertising his presence to the hunter. And it's up to the hunter then to try and put it together and work out where they think he'll be and where they think he's going. As a hunter, finding these active scrapes should trigger that little urge in the hunter to go and find the deer. Now, the question with this stag that I've got, is he actively working his scrapes, or did he just scrape this one? The thing is, if he's actively working his scrapes, and we know where that line of scrapes are, we might be able to take advantage of it, because he'll be working his beat. Now, I was here earlier this morning, 10 minutes ago, and I was up there. There's a second scrape up there. That scrape up there has been used as well, but not to this extent. So from that, my conclusion is that he's working his scrapes. So the advantage of the GPS, when you've marked where all these scrapes are, you know, you can start to work those areas instead of just blindly wandering around the bush hoping to see him. Nothing wrong with a bit of luck. In fact, if you ever offered a bucket full of skill and a bucket full of luck and you have a choice, take 50-50. Now, I know where there's quite a few other scrapes here. What I'd normally do is I'd go and visit a few other scrapes from a distance with the binoculars and see whether he's been using them. But, and here's the big but, I don't concentrate on looking at the scrapes. On the way, I'm thinking about seeing the stag, not thinking about seeing the scrapes. I will eventually get to those scrapes and I can look at them through the binoculars. But if I just concentrate on walking to that scrape, I'm going to get busted. Well, we've got another scrape here that doesn't look like it's worth anything, but trust me, this scrape is worth something. You'll see just over the course since the end of last year, the vegetation started to recover in the scrape. Scrapes don't last forever. But anyway, this scrape's a little bit more important than some of the other scrapes I know. There's quite a lot of deer hair in this scrape. This scrape's not consistently, but several times through the year it'll get used as a bed. I know how to approach it. I know how to get in here. So that's a good thing to have up your sleeve. Looks nothing, but it will fire up. Where we're sitting at the moment, there would be approximately wait till we count. We'll count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's eight scrapes within probably a 200 metre radius. So from that we know that this is a spot that attracts deer, right? There's no question about that. When you start to get that number of scrapes in that smaller confined area, instead of spread out a long way between one another, it starts to tell us that it's an area where the deer frequent quite regularly. We know that too because there's tracks and there's poop, there's rub trees. Doesn't look like it's worth two bob, as they'd say. There's another scrape that's not being used yet, and that's the key word, yet. It will get used. I just did a bit of taping over there. We're probably 80 metres away from where the other scrape is. This is a very substantial scrape when it gets going, as you can see by the area. Oh, look at that. Got toadstool growing in it. As I said, doesn't look like it's worth anything. But a lot of this sort of sign is what we build on, and we know it's going to come good. When those stags want to advertise their presence, they're going to start coming here, scraping at it, urinating it here, marking their scent line up in the tree. This will come good. There's no question about it. When the stags start coming back and they start marking their territory, no good. Take territory out, Peter. It's not territory, it's home range. As Harrison said, territory is defended. Home range is where they move. They don't fight to defend territory. They fight to prove their dominance. And once they're dominant, all those other little stags, guess what? They just stay away from that big fella. Until one day, they're going to have a punch-up. Now, we looked at this scrape 3 months ago. I haven't been back for 3 months, and have a look at what I found today.
Scrape here has gone through a few changes the last couple of years. In the back you can see an old cherry tree. That was killed in the 2006 fires that come through here, and eventually it's fallen over. But there was a very good scrape underneath it, which you can see towards the base of the tree. I'll throw a stick. How's that? Yeah, over there in the back, right? So that bit stopped getting used, and now we've got the other scrape in the foreground that the stags come to. There's some stag tracks here, had a bit of rain on them, but interesting here is there's a lot of deer sign around here on the side of the hill. Now that's why the scrape's here.
This scrape is on a travel corridor where the deer travel up this little bit of a gully and out over the top. It's the advantage of having a trail cam on it. Trail cam's here to have a look at the direction the deer are travelling in. What it's taught me, and we should have been able to learn this from reading the tracks on the ground too. The majority of the deer traffic through here go that direction. So I know they come from down here. Majority of the photographs I get are after dark at this particular scrape. So it's not much point sitting on this scrape and trying to get a look at a deer during the day or in the afternoon when the majority, started again, of travel is going that way and coming from down there, and the deer are here of a night. So I can still put this to advantage. The deer are coming from down there. And when they go back, they're not coming back this way, so they're going back a different way. So what this indicates to me is they have a direction of travel that they prefer. So they have this way they go, and when they come back, because I know where they're going, right? They're going to a little bit of pasture up over the ridge. When they come back, they're not coming back this way, they're going back a different way. So, evenings, down there, looking for the deer. Mornings, find where they're coming back and looking for the deer where they come back. That's the big advantage of me trail cam. We're at the scrape. Here's the game trail to me left. It's obvious on the camera when you look. So we've got a game trail on my left and your right, which is leading into and out of the scrape. So we'll have a look at the tracks and see which way the predominant direction is, whether the deer is going two ways or whether it's just going one direction. We have deer tracks going in both directions. So this, to me, indicates that the deer come and go this way. It's not one of those game trails that predominantly has one direction, which I'll show in other, if I haven't already shown them, in other clips, where some scrapes and wallows have a predominant direction that deer travel in. I know what it leads to. Out on the ridge further around is a network of beds. There's probably about 10 beds on that ridge, and they're all facing the early morning sun. Here we've got some rub trees where he thrashed the trees, covered in mud as well. Got another rub tree behind me. But we also have a bed up the hill where you can sit up at the bed and you can actually see this scrape. We've got a couple of little beds back in here in the thicket. So there's a hint, isn't there? Don't be in a hurry to walk to the scrape. This is where a hunter's pair of binoculars are just about your best friend in these situations. To try and look into and through the scrub to find the deer. Look, look, look. It's not the sign on the ground that you want to eat. It's what's made the sign. I'm standing at the scrape and we can observe this scrape from quite a considerable distance. The only issue with where we're going to watch this scrape or look at it from will be which direction the wind or the breeze is coming from, which will carry our scent and alert the deer. This is a new scrape. I know this country very well. This scrape has never been here until this year. So a stag's made a new scrape. Whether it stays and lasts the distance is another question. Not all scrapes are permanent. Good clear hoof prints here, where the deer's been standing on its back legs to either leave its scent up in the tree or to actually see if there is scent in the tree. So when the deer stands on its back legs like that, its hooves from the weight of the animal will spread. Now there's things in the bush that are here to confuse us, and this is one of them. This looks like a scrape. For all intents and purposes, at first glance or from a distance, it looks like a deer scrape. It's not a deer scrape. This is wombats. Now what's going on here is just a short distance away, we have the wombat burrow. Comes out, lays here in the sun. Sometimes you bust them in places like this, then does a quick back home and safety. Now some of the features that distinguish this is one, the type of tree. This is a very straight tree with no overhanging branches or any lean to it. Stags like to make their scrapes where they have an overhanging branch or the tree's on a lean so that they can put their scent and their marking up as high as possible. This ground has not been scraped out by hooves. And when you have a look at the way it just undulates instead of being dug out like this, that's a bit of a giveaway. The way these roots are bared as well, all around the side. A circle of bare earth around the tree, right around the tree. Now what happens with the stags? They don't make a circle right around the tree. Well, not that I've ever seen, right? Then we have the wombat pulp. So we have that as well. Quite a few distinguishing things. But it's just so easy to look at something and assume what it is in the bush without having a very close look. But it's definitely not the stag. If a stag had done this, he'd have scraped. This leaf pattern wouldn't be neat and tidy like this around the edge. Got a very neat edge here, almost like a gardener. Now, I'm not excited about this one at all. This is actually cattle scraped this out. Hasn't been done by deer. Cow tracks are quite obvious. They've dug it out. Would have bedded down here as well. Rub their neck or their shoulder on the tree. That's why the bark's a bit like this. It's one of those things that we can easily confuse with deer sign. But as I keep saying, the tracks are the evidence on the ground. Tracks and hair in particular. There's no tracks here from deer, and there's no hair here from deer. There's cattle tracks, and there's cattle hair on the rub. I'm back. I can't help myself. I've had enough of looking at old scrapes. I want to go and find a deer. Good day for that. Oh, you fool. Take the bloody lens cap off, will you? Oh, that's better. As you can see, we've got a wallow, a dried out old wallow. Now, it's May. There's been a fair bit of rain recently. The rains, this last month, we've probably had a good 45, 50 mil of rain. But this wallow still hasn't gone muddy yet. It's damp, but it hasn't gone muddy. One of the things about wallows that I like to point out is they're generally in fairly obvious places, but not always. They've got to be where the ground is damp. The stags can't work them if the ground's not damp. Now this wallow, as you can see, obviously hasn't been used for a while since it's dried out. Now one of the things about wallows is the trap that we all fall into is when we know where there's a wallow, we walk into the wallow to have a look for the sign. Now if you're a hound hunter, that's fine, because all you're looking for is the deer tracks to let the hounds go on. If you're a stalker, you bug it up. What is important at a wallow is to have a good look around. Have a good look around before you come to it and watch and listen at that wallow from as further away as you can. Now this wallow, it doesn't look like it, but up the hill there in the furthest part, in the top part of the screen, I can see this wallow from about 90 metres away. So it's not important to walk to that wallow. And even when we're looking at a wallow, as a stalker, we don't need to go to the wallow. This is where binoculars are pretty important, because you can look at that wallow from a distance with your binoculars. The purpose is to look around and in the area and vicinity of the wallow. Geez, I stuttered that bloody, didn't I? Hey, anyway, we'll keep going. So we'll go and have a little bit of a look at this wallow. This what we've got here is hair. Now Sambar, whenever they wallow, they lose hair. So if you find a dry wallow and you're not sure what it is, have a look around. That hair will be there. If there's no hair there, you're probably looking at something different. Well, that's not a hair, that's a bit of grass. We'll throw that away. And you can do this at home, right? This is all about developing our skills. This is what we're talking about in this video, right? Now, sounds silly, but if you haven't shot a deer, collect the hairs from the wallow or anywhere you find them like this. Collect the hairs, you can have a look at the hair, learn what that hair looks like. You can compare it with a dog. If you've got a dog at home, you go home, pluck the dog, have a look at the dog hair. There is a difference. I'm not going to tell you the difference because there's no point in me telling you because you want to learn these things. I'm assuming you want to learn them. So pluck the hair off the dog. Same thing. Dead wallabies on the side of the road. Dead kangaroos on the side of the road. Dead wombats on the side of the road. They all offer a learning experience to see the difference in the types of hair. And then hopefully they're little things that will be able to use to your advantage one day. But if you're fortunate and you've shot a sambar, you can learn a lot off that carcass. You can learn so much about that animal, people just forget. They just don't bother looking properly. Anyway, that's enough on hair and dry wallows. Mud. Mud's a clue, isn't it? So why is there mud on a tree? You don't have to think very hard again, do you? So the first question is, where's the wallow? There's going to be a wallow around here somewhere. Now, I suspect from the colour of the mud, it's the one I've been doing a bit of filming at, because the next wallow that's not far from here has different colour mud in it. But I could be mistaken. Keeping an eye on this wallow now since May, and it's taken up until now, September, for a stag to start working it. It's quite a lot of good evidence here. We've got tracks, we've got deer hair, we've got fresh mud. The last couple of days he's been here, and there's good sign of where he's been coming and going regularly. We've got fresh rub on the tree here. It's got mud on it. No antler scars, but he's been rubbing the mud off it and leaving scent. Good sized stag track here at a wallow. Front foot, rear foot. Because of the bulk of the animal, he can't get his rear foot right on top of the front foot. So we know he's got a fair sized body. We don't know how good his antlers are until we get a look at him. Clue again, a bit of sambar hair encrusted in mud that's come off while the deer's been wallowing. Quite often the stags will have big clumps of hard dry mud like this on them, and then they obviously get pulled off and fall on the ground. Now active wallow, all fired up. It's fairly muddied up. However, the water's started to clarify on top of the mud, so it's not red hot. This is another instance of where we can go in, stir that mud up, and then come back and look at it and see how quickly it starts to clarify. Now, I'm not going to roll in it. Can you hear it? Of course you can hear it. The difference here to where I've splashed the water and the mud compared to where I didn't splash any. So by doing this, we're learning. Everything we do, we can learn from. This wallow hasn't got much water in it, but it's still got mud. I'm having a good look at the sign here, and it's a good learning experience here for me, because I'll estimate that this stag was in this last night, and there's also been another deer here as well with a smaller hoof. Now the advantage of this one is I have a trail camera here, so I can actually check back against my sign reading skills to see whether I'm correct. We're in another deer bed. Now the significance about this deer bed is that we're only probably 100 metres from one of the wallows that I showed you. Now, deer often camp up pretty close to their wallows, thus the reason I told you not to walk straight to the wallow. Bit of a trap for stalkers. Well, this wasn't here 4 days ago, I can tell you that. Wasn't here 3 days ago. Stags come here. He's rolled in the mud in the gutter, left his scent. He's been here quite a while. There's quite a bit of sign here. But the water's started to clarify on top of the mud. We'll come and have a look at this because it's a good one here, you can see that. I wonder how long it'd take for it to clear up from when it was muddy. Good hair imprint here where the deer's been in the mud. It's all dried out a bit. When I put my hand in the mud and stirred up the wallow, I can actually smell that deer on my hand now. He's been fairly active here. That would have given a motorist a surprise, wouldn't it? There's tyre marks here in the side of the mud. Now, I know those tyre marks were made 3 days ago, so in the last 3 days, the deer's been in the wallow. Not a normal wallow, just a wallow on the side of the road. If this stag keeps this up, he's not going to live very long, wallowing like this on the side of the road. In as little as 12 months, probably a little bit longer that I've been watching this scrape. Well, I've been watching the scrape a lot longer than 12 months. But in the last 12 months, this has gone from just a scrape under the tree here to a small wallow complex. Basically because the conditions have changed. We've got good wet ground here, and stags need wet ground to make their wallow. They don't need wet ground to make their scrape. This is a good sign. This stag appeared here probably 3 to 4 years ago, and his little network of scrapes has increased in that period of time. Certainly showing some good activity here. Ah, my golly, nearly fell down the hill. We've got some knee marks left here from where the deer's been laying in the mud. Now, these are not very big knee marks for a deer. And this is where our sign interpretation starts to take effect by recognising what is actually big stag sign and what's smaller deer sign. Doesn't look like much. Be easy to walk past it, but it is a wallow. It was getting a lot of use last year by 3 different stags at around this time of the year, but at the moment it's had no wallowing activity. It's well washed out from the winter rain. There's a few tracks evident where deer have walked through, and there's a few tracks actually in the area where the deer wallow. But it will fire up. The stags will start to use this area and they will wallow in it. One thing with wallows that I like to think about is we're drawn to them as hunters. It's a bit of a hunter magnet when you get a really good wallow that's in active use. This wallow here, there's several vantage points where I can look at it from a considerable distance at around 80 to 90 metres. And we'll have a bit of a look at that. Edge of the wallow's just in the right-hand corner, and you can see the clear belt up through that bit of bush. This is where our binoculars are really worth their weight in gold. When we're in a little area like that, we can have a look at this wallow, see what's going on. But it's also a good spot to sit if the wind's right. Now, there's the key. If the wind and the breezes are right, it's a good spot to sit up there. That's a good 90 metres up there as far as we can see in the camera. Here's a bit of a find. I'll have a look. Been a sapling growing here. It's been cut off. Looks like it's been cut off with a saw. I'd say something like a pruning saw. Strange thing to find in the bush, that, isn't it? But there'll be a reason. There's always a reason for things. I'm looking down into the wallow. Interesting to me is that at the wallow there was very little sign, but the walk up this hill to where I'm standing, I've cut quite a number of fresh deer tracks where they've been walking around the hill. So the deer are here, they're just not using the wallow.